All right, Alexander. So let's start this video. We got a lot of news to cover, by the way. Let's start it first with Viktor Orban of Hungary visiting Vladimir Putin of Russia. A lot of statements made as well, and an interesting meeting, not only about Ukraine and Russia's imminent, though we may not want to use the word imminent anymore, according to Jen Psaki. But anyway, Russia's imminent invasion of Ukraine. Not only about that, but this was also about energy. And
Yeah.
here you have a European leader taking some initiative and saying, "I'm done dealing with these EU idiots." And their energy dictates I'm going to go secure what's best for my country. Anyway, and a very important meeting. Two of the most popular, most respected, I would say, leaders in the world. Even if you don't like them, they still command respect, and that is Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin meeting. What did you make of this?
It was
Meeting between those
it
two?
was an absolutely extraordinary meeting, and what made it extraordinary is Viktor Orban. Now, can I just say something? Orban is made an extraordinarily correct point. He said, Hungary is a small country. Russia operates at a completely different scale to Hungary. He said that, and yet here we see Putin and Orban meeting. And Orban, leader of Hungary, a small country, he's received by Putin as an equal. There are substantive discussions. And where Orban has gone, the others are now following. So we've received reports yesterday that Macron is indeed in planning to go to Moscow. And apparently so is Scholz. So they're following Orban's lead. Suddenly, Orban has established himself as the leader of Europe. I mean, it's an astonishing state of affairs. It's this leader of this small country, unpopular with the EU Commission, hated by the neoliberal globalist order, subject to these relentless campaigns, facing a difficult re-election in April, one which, by the way, I think has suddenly become much easier. I am sure he will be re-elected after this event. But there he is at the absolute top table, talking with the leader of one of the three great powers, talking about war and peace, talking about great geopolitical issues, talking about responses, Russia's security issues, Europe's security issues, and at the same time talking energy, showing that he's concerned about his people, talking about economic and trade deals and things of that kind. I have to say this. I mean, I know people get very worked up about Orban, and you hear all kinds of stories and things said about him, most of which, in my opinion, have no basis and validity. What other leader is there in Europe who could play a game of this with this skill, who could play with such weak hand? Because Hungary is a small country, and through sheer force of personality, rise to this level where he's playing such a big role in international politics. I mean, he is looking more important at this moment than the President of France, the Chancellor of Germany, the Prime Minister of Italy, and I'm not going to even start with the Prime Minister of Great Britain, who is all over the place. I mean, I have to say this. People only need to look at what happened in Moscow to see this for themselves. I cannot imagine after this event that he will fail to be re-elected in April. The Hungarian people, seeing all of this, even many of them who may have criticisms of Orban, many of them no doubt possibly quite justified criticisms, must see that they have a leader at the moment who makes big news, who sits at the top table, who's brought Hungary for the first time since the First World War onto the map, made it a big player in international affairs, and I cannot imagine that they will want to dispense with him.
He is without a doubt the most important leader in Europe. I'm sure Macron is looking on at this and saying, you know what, if I want to become the most important leader in Europe. I better follow his lead. No doubt about it. Macron is looking on and saying Orban is he understands what's going on, and Macron's going to follow suit. That's my that's how I'm seeing it right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
What came out of this meeting?
yeah.
What do you think came out of this meeting?
Right. Well, let's first of all talk about the bread and butter issues, which are extremely important. Now, Orban spoke out against sanctions. He said that he'd been against sanctions in 2014, even though he was forced to go along with them. He said that the sanctions in 2014 had been a complete failure, that Russia's economy is extremely strong, much stronger than many people seem to realize, that Hungary benefits from its good trading links with Russia, and he forged a whole lot of good deals with the Russians on energy. He's making it absolutely clear that as far as he's concerned, Hungary needs Russian energy, and his voice obviously will be speaking out within the European Council, within the European Union, against any sanctions which interrupt Russian energy flows. And it's not just energy, there's all sorts of other deals, trading deals that will be done. He again said that all that the sanctions in 2014 managed was to lose Hungary business in Russia, and he's taking steps to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So that's one thing that came out very clear and very strong. He says sanctions against Russia failed before, they're going to fail again. We need to work with the Russians. Hungary specifically benefits from its trade with Russia. We're building on that. We're doing deals, not just energy deals, all kinds of other deals as well. And the Europeans should follow where we're leading on this. Now, I think more and more people in Europe are gradually coming round to Orban's view on the sanctions, and the fact that he spoke out in such an outspoken way about the sanctions whilst in Moscow suggests to me that he feels that his side on the sanctions issue within the European Union is winning the argument. So that's the first thing. The second is he made it absolutely clear that he thinks that Russia's interests, that its concerns on security issues are legitimate, and he is lending his voice to those other voices within the European Union, Germany to some extent, France, Italy, which are now looking for some kind of diplomatic solution. And Putin used his press conference with Macron to insist on his points that the diplomatic solution has to be twofold. First, it must achieve an internal settlement of the situation in Ukraine via the full implementation of the Minsk agreement. That means direct negotiations between the government in Kiev and the leaders of the two republics of the Donbass, leading to a new constitution, a federal structure for Ukraine, autonomy for the Donbass, and new elections. That's non-negotiable as far as the Russians are concerned. And then there have to be these legally binding security guarantees, and clearly a negotiation about that is now underway. And Putin was careful at the very end of his comments to say that he didn't want to say too much, because clearly a negotiation is underway. And Putin mentioned at the end of his comments that Macron is heading to Moscow. And clearly, it's perfectly obvious to me that Orban went to Moscow partly with a view to preparing the ground for the visit by Macron. So there is some kind of negotiation underway. It's not clear where this is all leading or how it's going to work out. Putin is standing his ground. He's not shifting his positions. Orban is endorsing them. Macron appears to be moving towards Putin's position.
It's very interesting that Orban went to meet with Putin, and Ukraine was brought up because and now Macron's going to follow, because both Macron and Orban are going to be facing tough elections pretty much around the same time as well, which is really interesting. So literally within a couple of months,
Yes.
we're going to have some very big news to report out of France and out of Hungary.
Yes.
But even more importantly, that no one really talks about is that Orban is a player. Hungary, as a country, does have a stake and is a player in what's going on in Ukraine. Hungary has issues with Ukraine as well. And I think it was important for Orban to go and meet with Putin and to discuss not only energy, not only Europe and the geopolitical situation of Ukraine, but I'm sure that there are a lot of issues in Ukraine vis-a-vis Hungary that Orban wants to safeguard for a Hungarian, an ethnic Hungarian country that is located in the west of Ukraine. So, I mean, Hungary does have a stake in what's going on in the region, but even more specifically in the country. So once again, you're seeing Orban looking after the Hungarian diaspora as well, in a way.
Yes.
I mean, he's really positioning himself as a leader of Hungarians around the world, as well as a leader in Europe.
Indeed, absolutely. And now, can I just say, of course, you refer to it as a Hungarian diaspora, but it's important to understand that these borders are artificial. And of course, Hungary's borders have also been adjusted in all kinds of different ways. I mean, it's not so much a diaspora, it's part of, if you like, what used to be historic Hungary that's ended up in this artificial Soviet construct, which is today's Ukraine. So
which strikes at the heart of the Ukraine problem, which strikes at the heart of the Ukraine
absolutely.
problem. Yeah.
And the important thing about this is, of course, not only is Orban concerned about all of this, but he went out of his way over the course of the trip to Moscow, to remind everybody of this and to remind everybody that the policies of the Ukrainian government are inimical to the Hungarian minority in Ukraine, just as they are inimical to the Russian minority there. In other words, the Hungarians and the Russians have a community of interests over Ukraine on this specific issue of minority rights in Ukraine. And he made it absolutely clear that if only because of this reason, he is opposed to Ukraine joining NATO. And of course, Hungary is a NATO member and it has the right of veto over Ukraine joining NATO. So he went out of his way to remind everybody of these points and to emphasize them.
Right. So as you have Orban meeting with Putin and they're discussing these issues, you have the Biden White House taking notice of this and changing their rhetoric towards Ukraine and what's going on there. Most notably, you had Jen Psaki, who just a month ago was saying that Russia is going to invade. It's an imminent invasion. It's going to happen literally tomorrow. It's happening, everybody. I mean, she said the words imminent. Now it's kind of like, well, the invasion in Ukraine is not so imminent. You also had the French, I believe the defense minister did an interview yesterday, and he pretty much said, yes, Russians are having military exercises in and around Ukraine, in and around Belarus. They have about 30,000 troops. He said they're going to do a military exercise along the Russian-Belarus border. And the media is saying Russians are going to do a military exercise around Belarus, around the Belarus-Ukraine border. It's really interesting how the media continues to manipulate the wording so that they can somehow say that Russian troops are close to the Ukrainian border. But anyway, the French, and I think it is the defense minister, said, yeah, they're having exercises inside Russia, but we don't see any sign of an invasion whatsoever. So a lot of the narrative is also trying to backtrack from what we have been saying on this channel for a good month plus now.
Absolutely,
they're catching up to us, Alex.
Absolutely,
they're catching up satellites.
Absolutely,
and intelligence.
Well, I know. We just applied common sense and looked at what everybody was saying. I mean, but you're absolutely right. I mean, the French are now openly. I mean, they've been saying it off the record, but now they're coming out and speaking openly, and says that this Russian invasion is a myth. There's not going to be a Russian invasion. The Ukrainians, of course, have been saying it also for several days too. The only government that now seems to be pressing on with this narrative of an imminent Russian invasion is the British, which we will come to in a moment, because even the Jen Psaki now says it's no longer imminent. Now, what I found particularly insulting about that comment is that she said, well, I've only used this word once. Really? You're kidding me. The American government, the US government, has been leading everybody to think that a Russian invasion of Ukraine is round the corner ever since November. We've had endless talk about the Russians preparing this attack, this vast army the Russians have gathered on the border, the fact that they're preparing to march on Kiev. We had Biden allegedly telling Zelensky that they're about to, sack Kiev and things of that kind. And suddenly all of this narrative is being switched off. And of course, the reason it's being switched off is the Ukrainians won't accept it, the French won't accept it, the Hungarians won't accept it, and it's becoming an unsustainable narrative now. And what we're starting to see is that whole narrative of a Russian invasion starting to fall apart. What it has done, what the Americans have achieved by it, what whoever was driving this thing has achieved by it, is that they've spooked the Europeans with talk of sanctions, which would be disastrous for Europe. They've spooked the international community, which we saw in the UN Security Council debate, with people, all these countries now getting really worried that, there's going to be a sanctions war, which is going to make energy prices around the world explode. They've reignited the discussions, the negotiations, to try to get a resolution of the Ukrainian crisis underway. The French and the Germans are now apparently in earnest trying to get those negotiations up and running again. And we see increasing signs of nervousness about this from the Ukrainians as well. We've had statements from the Danilov, who is the head of the Ukrainian Security Council, saying, oh, no, we can't possibly negotiate on the point of the Minsk agreement. That would cause Ukraine to fragment. We see Kuleba, the ultra hardline Ukrainian foreign minister, saying, no, we will never grant special status to Donbass, even though that's what the Minsk agreement says. The Ukrainians are now making these comments because they sense that they're losing support with the French and the Germans, and that's making them very nervous. So they're coming up with these statements. The fact that they're coming up with these statements is a sign of how nervous they're getting. And so the result is we have negotiations underway with the French and the Germans and the Russians to settle the Ukrainian thing. And I'm still working through the American responses to the Russian demand for security guarantees, but it's now been leaked by El País, the Spanish newspaper, and the overwhelming impression I'm getting is that the Americans, the United States, is about to concede, or not about to concede, is working towards conceding everything that the Russians are demanding. The Americans are now making proposals on almost every arms control and security issue that the Russians have been asking for discussions about, and the Americans have been refusing to talk about for the last 10 years, the last 20 years. And on top of all of that, they're saying that they will continue to support NATO's open door. One sentence, we continue to support NATO's open door. But just consider, that's a qualified sentence. We continue to support NATO's open door. Not we support NATO's open door. The key word is continue, because what you continue to do, you can discontinue doing later. So someone in Washington has come and said, look, this is madness. It's got completely out of control. we have to find some way out. We've got to start these negotiations. We've got to take all this talk of sanctions and war off the agenda. It means we've got to talk to the Russians. We've got to talk to the Russians. Maybe we're not ready yet to capitulate on everything that they are asking of us, but we are playing from a disastrously weak hand. Whoever hatched this particular plan last November of talking up of this imminent invasion has brought us to a sorry pass. The Europeans are doing what they're doing. We're doing what we're doing. We've got to find a way out. And I don't think the United States is actually ready to make any big concessions at the moment. But the document they sent to the Russians is, well, it's extraordinary to read. It's a sign of a United States in retreat, or at least, let me change that. It's a sign of forces of rationality in the United States taking control. I suspect people in the Pentagon, by the way, and the Commerce Department and the Treasury Department, and maybe the Fed, and telling the neocons, look, you brought us to this pass. We're the adults. We're now taking charge. That's how it looks to me. Mm-hmm.
God, did the Biden White House really screw this one up? And things are not going well on the domestic front. I mean, the jobs report. Actually, I think they have like a net jobs loss now. Or so. I mean, it's really bad.
I know.
Things are going really bad for the Biden White House to an extraordinary level of bad. And they really screwed this one up in a big, big way. And Alexander, I mean, you're going to have that detailed analysis on your channel. So you'll get into a lot of the detail of the U.S. response to the Russian security guarantees. In the meantime, though, before we get to Boris's trip, to Boris's talk with talk with Putin, which will probably be in. I'll make this a two-part, which will probably be in the second part of this video. Before we get to Boris and the UK, things are going from bad to worse for Biden, because you are going to have a meeting between Putin and Xi, which I am 100% confident will just shake the world, shake the geopolitical world with some of the announcements that they're going to put forth. And it is not going to make Biden's foreign policy strategy look any better one bit. I mean, this is such a freaking train wreck. They took their eye off the ball in a massive way with this whole Russia-Ukraine nonsense.
Yes. Absolutely, they have completely mishandled it. They launched a narrative back in November. I think at least one of the purposes of launching that narrative, I mean, there were probably multiple purposes, but certainly one of them was to make, Biden the new JFK, just as JFK, faced down Khrushchev, made Khrushchev blink. That story about the Cuban Missile Crisis, which, by the way, isn't true anyway, but, that's the narrative that was spun at the time. Anyway, make Biden the new JFK. And the American people have taken one look at this, and they have been completely unimpressed. His ratings are continuing to tank. They are going down the tubes. And of course, what people in the United States are worried about is the fact that prices are rising. There's talk now that the interest rates may have to go up, even though the Fed has been dithering about this. But the prices are rising. The economy is not looking strong. Many people are refusing to look for work, which explains why the unemployment figures look better than they actually are. The debt is now at 130% of GDP. I mean, and much of it is due to the way in which the Biden administration has spent money like there's no tomorrow. There is growing sense across the country, in the United States, even many Democrats now have had it up to there with this administration. And there is this huge feeling that this administration is going horribly wrong. They're not impressed by all these antics over Ukraine. And we see that the permanent government of the United States, the deep state, if you like, those sort of people, they are clearly said enough. The neocons have taken us absolutely down a disastrous path. The sanctions won't work. They will backfire on us. They will undermine the position of the dollar. And we don't want that. They could cause energy prices to spike, and we don't want that either. They've exposed the extent to which we're not in a position to take on the Russians militarily in Eastern Europe. So this has been a disaster for us, and they're now calling time on the whole affair with these replies that they've sent to the Russians. So this administration is unraveling. Its domestic policy is a shambles, and its foreign policy is a disaster. This is a far bigger debacle than the Afghanistan debacle of the summer.
Yeah. Let's end it there, and we'll get to the UK and Boris Johnson. And real quickly, what do you think is going to be announced between Putin and Xi, or how big of a meeting is this? Very quickly,
it's going to be a very, very, very big meeting. There's going to be the big announcements are going to be on energy. That has already been highlighted. So what we're going to see is increasing transfer. Instead of energy, gas being supplied to Europe, it'll be supplied to China. But there's going to be a massive range of deals on especially financial cooperation with the Chinese and the Russians moving forward towards creating their new financial structures independent of those of the US. And that's going to be a big thing. I'm sure there will also be other agreements in the background, which might not be announced on military and intelligence cooperation. That's already going on, but there'll be an awful lot of that going on too. And bear in mind that it's becoming increasingly clear that we are talking now about two allies. I mean, the way the Chinese responded to that imbecilic telephone call that Blinken made to the Chinese foreign minister to try to get him to put pressure on Putin over Ukraine. I mean, all of that, it's now become absolutely clear that we're talking about Team China-Russia. And that's going to be making the weather now. It was clearly the case in the Security Council. They've got the initiative. The Biden administration has given it to them.
Yeah, the Biden administration has given it to them.
Has given it to them. It's consolidated this alliance, and it's given it an opportunity to exert itself in international affairs. And by the way, everything comes at a price. Everything comes at a cost. China has backed Russia over Ukraine. The cost for Russia is going to be Russia's backing to China over Taiwan. And the Chinese have been making pretty tough signals about Taiwan. And we haven't really covered it recently, but the Chinese have been ramping up their signals about Taiwan over the last few days. So, you know, the fact that energy flows are going to go to China from Russia strengthens China's position going forward over Taiwan. The idea of a US blockade of China is not going to be a practical one. So that's where this is heading. The Biden administration has had good cards to play. It's given them all to the other side. People will look back in the future. Historians will look back in the future, and they will look at the first year of this administration, and they will say that it destroyed the geopolitical position of the United States. It undermined it in Europe, it compromised the future of NATO, and it has consolidated this Eurasian axis of China and Russia, which is now looking unstoppable.
Yeah, you know, everyone talks about the NATO alliance and the NATO alliance, and it's indispensable, the NATO alliance. No one in the media is talking about the Russia-China alliance, which is what it is. Maybe they haven't announced it. Maybe they haven't put a fancy acronym to it.
Yep.
Maybe they don't have fancy offices located in Brussels for it. But make no mistake about it. You now have a China-Russia alliance, and you're going to have other countries jump in on that as well.
Absolutely.
No one talks about that. They talk about NATO, NATO, NATO. No one's mentioning that this whole affair has solidified a Russia-China alliance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, the fact that they don't have a bureaucracy, an autonomous bureaucracy running the whole thing, like NATO has, actually makes that alliance more real. Because, I mean, to be very clear about it, NATO isn't really an alliance anymore anyway, not a military alliance. It's not functional as a military alliance. It is a bureaucracy. It's a business.
Bureaucracy, yeah. Well said. All right. The Duran.locals.com, everybody. Duran shop. There you see the shirt. Good day. Use that code. Alexandra, let's talk about Boris. And there's the mug as well. 10% off when you use that code.